Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We have a really special talk happening tonight in honor of the start of the Momentum Club. We have a talk series this week where we are talking all about community. And in today's talk, we have Colleen Lowrie coming on. I think, clicked all the right buttons. Yes, to get her here.
Hi.
Welcome, Colleen.
Hello.
I'm so just excited that we are going to have this conversation. I think it was just maybe a week and a half ago or 2 weeks, we were sitting by the river in Guelph having a chat about ritual. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about this again. Will you come talk about it with me? Because Colleen, I'll just introduce you to those that are watching that might not know you, but you
Absolutely
have your Master's of Divinity, and you are the camp director at, oh my goodness, I'm going to get your camp wrong. I should have written.
I can just say it. Camp Manessatung.
Manessatung. Thank
you.
And you are our youth leader, doing youth ministry at Dublin Street United Church. Is that a fair bio?
That is a fair bio. And when I was doing my MDiv, a lot of the stuff that I focused on was innovative ministry, and like how we can really bring ritual to our young folks and our communities that are just because we're seeing like the church kind of die away, and for good reason in some ways. And so I focused on like what's new, what are we putting in that place, and ritual just kept coming up over and over again. And I know that's something you've noticed recently too.
Yes, and so some of my interest in talking about ritual, it comes from my work in anxiety. And when I first started talking about the Tranquil Minds program, one of the things that I always wanted to help my patients with was creating rituals that help create calm in mind, body, and spirit. And as I've paid attention to this area of research and sort of watched what's happening, I actually know that ritual in itself helps with anxiety. And there's I listened to a super cool podcast this summer while I was off on, it's called like the Happiness Labs.
Ooh.
She had Casper ter Kuile on it as her guest, and she was talking about astronauts. And like, may or may not know, but like, I really wanted to be an astronaut when I was little. Like, I was like,
I did too. But they told me I couldn't be because of my heart condition.
Yeah.
It was a devastating moment as a 5-year-old. Anyway, go ahead.
That's really sad. No one told me I couldn't be an astronaut. My mom said that I decided I didn't want to be it when I watched like a movie when they went to space, like Mission to Mars. But like when I was 12, I was like, I'm going to be the first woman on Mars. This is my life's plan. And then it was like, that actually will probably involve some sacrifices to my life that I don't want to make, is the story I remember telling myself. Whether or not that was like, I will probably die like in the movie is how my mom remembers it. But anyway, so in astronauts, there's a huge culture of ritual, and it's very important in creating calm physiology for liftoff, which is high stakes, and a time where you think people would be really anxious, but they're not. Astronauts going to do not have high heart rates. They are not experiencing physiologic symptoms of anxiety. It is fully managed. They've got it.
That's amazing.
Right?
Way to go, astronauts.
Way to go, astronauts. And I was thinking I was like, we can learn from this. Like, we can have rituals before the things in our lives that give us anxiety, that help us calm down, and not just in a like, oh, I need to calm down way, but like in a truly experiencing the inner peace that allows for connection and performance, and for us to really be in the world in those moments that matter, the best versions of ourselves, that version of ourselves we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering if we could like talk about first, like what makes something a ritual? Because in health, we talk a lot about habits, and I don't think habits cut it. This is an elevation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think actually you've already touched on this a little bit in introducing the Momentum series. Like I've been paying attention to
Thanks,
to your introduction of the Momentum series, or the Momentum Club.
Yes, we have a club now.
And I think one of the things that's so important about ritual is practicing it in community. And so your astronauts are doing that. And if you go back to, I personally went back to some of Casper's older work today, because you and I were talking a little bit about Casper and his work.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to go back and look at the How We Gather report, which was the report that I first read when I first became aware of him.
You encountered him through Harry Potter podcasts?
I did not. I encountered him through innovative theology. And so when I read his work, which was done in like 2012, this report came out. So it's about 10 years old, which I can't imagine. Even the stuff that he was talking about, which was things like CrossFit and SoulCycle, and the fact that those are heavily ritualized as well. The piece that was important, the piece that was significant, was that these are things that they do in community and they hold each other accountable. And a habit, I think, it's a thing that you do. It's a thing that you do daily. It may or may not be with intention. I think ritual also includes a certain amount of intentionality. And for me, it includes a connection to the sacred, but I don't know if that's necessarily necessary. I know it's necessary for me. And I think is probably necessary for more of us than maybe we think. Because I think we're in a real absence of connection to sacred right now.
Yeah.
And I think we're longing for it. And I think that that's where ritual comes into play.
Absolutely. Thanks for pulling that apart a little bit, Colleen. I agree with a lot of what you've said, where there's this piece of, if we're just practicing something on our own, it's harder to make it a ritual. Although I would say not impossible. I think you can have very personal rituals. And the intention might be there with meaning and a habit, but I think there's a depth of intention, right? So if your intention in your running practice, say you're going to start running, your intention of running is you need a way to exercise because you've been told that it's good for you, and you feel like maybe you'll lose 5 pounds if you just run. It's very difficult to maintain that habit. It's not very motivating, and there's nothing depth to it. Whereas if you are adding a habit and you want to ritualize it, I think there is this connection piece. And whether it is connection to the divine or to making that sacred, how do you make it sacred? I think is more interesting than what that means to each person, because there's so many different ways to do that. If you're picking up a running habit because I don't know, my mom ran, so every time I'm just like, I need out of the house, and I go for a run, like I connect to my mom. So if I wanted to build that into a ritual, I think the depth is there if I choose to find that piece there. And I think this is where we go wrong with our health habits. We're like, I'm going to do this, and it's not grounded. It's not meaningful. It doesn't have that like deeper meaning.
I'm trying to think of like pieces of ritual that have been my ritual. Really, a lot of my ritual is tied to the church and tied to a sacred connection
Yeah.
With the divine.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because ritual doesn't have to be, and I like your running example for this. Ritual doesn't have to be like a habit in that it's like let's say it's an everyday thing,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have to be that. It can be like an important ritual might be a way of celebrating or acknowledging the start of the fall.
Yeah.
You know? And whether that's through like an equinox type celebration, or if it's like I clean my desk and reset and take the time and light a candle and set an intention for the next for the next 3 months or so. That's still a ritual. I mean, that's a clear ritual.
Yeah.
But it's not like a daily habit, you know?
Yeah. And so
right?
different phases of rituals, right? There's rituals that we might take on every day, or there's ones that we might put in to mark certain moments. And I think there is space, and certainly what I'm hoping to do in Momentum Club is, we've talked a little bit about Casper's work, and the reason we've done that is that his book, The Power of Ritual, is going to be our book club pick this first quarter for fall, to really set the tone in terms of how can we cultivate these intentions. Because what I love about what Casper's work has done is really take what you're already doing and say, no, this is meaningful. You just need to add the intention and the attention to make it meaningful. Like, if your fall habit is that you would like to pull out your boots from storage, wrap a giant scarf around you, and go get a pumpkin spice latte and go for a walk and enjoy the fall leaves, like, there is no reason why that cannot be your fall ritual. If it's something that you're already doing, you make it meaningful. Go crunch those leaves, listen to them, have a friend that you do that with every year as a time to connect with each other, and then add the depth of conversation of what's been hard this year, what are you going to let go of this year, what are your hopes for this fall. And so I like what you were saying with, it doesn't have to be, just because maybe the rituals that you know of or the ones that you were brought up with were religious. If that works for you, amazing.
Yeah.
Keep those. But if it's not working for you, like, what is working, and how can you bring the meaning of that so you're not having that, what was a phrase you had? The loss of meaning, that like lack of sacredness.
Yeah. Someone that I find really inspiring when it comes to ritual, like everyday ritual, is actually, and I know, like, I'm going to say this and you're going to be like, well, of course, is Mary Kondo. And this idea of like sparking joy and all of this stuff. But the thing that I love about it, it's not necessarily the like organize your life piece that I love about what she does. It's the like, if you watch her TV specials, she sits down and she introduces herself to the space. And she gets to know the space, and she says, this is what I'm going to do. And she picks up each thing individually, and she brings a care and intentionality to like folding clothes. And she's like, you smooth it out and you think about like last time you wore it and like what you did when you were wearing it and like what you appreciated about that. And I'm just like, laundry just got so much deeper. But I love it. And it's a thing that like, it's a practice that I'm like pulling into my life, because you know what? I do laundry. I could use that, like, that's a time that I could be like finding meaning and having gratitude and those sorts of things. Granted, it's not so much a community thing unless you count the fact that there are enough people watching it that Netflix has made 2 specials from her.
Right, so there are other people out there smoothing out their clothes, thinking about when they last wore them.
Yeah.
I want to, for fun, push back on this idea that, like, why can't we just fold laundry? What is it that we want to be, why is like bringing that meaning in actually important?
Mm. I mean, you can just fold laundry. Like, you're allowed to just do that. But I find that, like, I find it just helps me engage with myself, I guess. And I like to have those moments, and it's nice when those moments are things that you can, um, that you're kind of, as you said, are already doing. I mean, you were talking about like actual rituals you're already doing, but like, I'm already doing laundry. There's a moment that I can take that time. If you want to just fold laundry and watch television, like go for it.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. But I guess, like, from, I'm just going to ask a personal question. You just be like, no, I
Yeah.
don't want to talk about that. But, like, what does that bring to your life compared to just folding laundry? Like, when you pick
Mm.
up a new ritual like that, where you're like, no, I'm actually going to try this.
I have to think about it a little bit.
Okay.
You know? I have to think about it a little bit. Why did I start doing that? I think I love the thought of like actually living intentionally. And it's an option, like it's a moment to live intentionally. You know? It's to say like instead of going through my life on autopilot and just being present, like and or just like being in my life but not being present to my life, it gives me a chance to be present to my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important for me.
I love that answer, Colleen. I absolutely feel the same way with a lot of the things that I do in my life is anything that helps me orient to being in the moment, being
Mhm.
present and with myself and my breath and my thoughts. To me, that's prayer. And the more of my time that I spend in that way, the better I feel, the calmer I
Mhm.
feel, the more connected I feel to my family, my surroundings. I think that when we take the time to incorporate, I think it's a, to me, that it goes in this category of mindfulness where there's this spectrum where you can pay no attention at all and never be engaged in what you're doing. You, or you can live every moment engaged in what you're doing. And I don't, to be fair, I don't think that anyone really ever gets there. I think
No.
like who's meditating and constantly in the moment, we're like thinking of, people who with monastic lives that are, like just always devoted and present. But I don't think that even they achieve that. Like that's the
No.
practice,
Oh,
right?
no. I don't
But
think they do either.
but I think in life in general, we can be walking towards that. We can
Mhm.
say, how can I move towards being where I am? And what that does as a practice, to get into the neurology of it, because
Yeah.
this is what I like, is that it builds these practices of being present where your brain, rather than running those anxious loops of what's happening next, what did I say horrible yesterday, who's judging me from what I said, oh no, what's going to happen tomorrow, you can't have those thoughts and be acknowledging your shirt for the gifts it gave you and those good times that you had when you were wearing it at the same time. It's
Yeah.
not congruent. There isn't space in thought for both of those things to happen. And, I'm interested to see more and follow what's going on with, the astronauts and their rituals and pulling those heart rates down. But like, I truly believe we can have that. Like, we can
Yeah.
all have the astronaut level chill at our shoot into space moment. We just
Yeah.
need to set ourselves up for that. And some of that is the rituals of knowing we're doing something that is meaningful, that has happened before, and really being held in those experiences. And I think that's what ritual has the capacity for.
Mhm. Mhm. I was talking with um the youth group today at Dublin, which this is three grade sevens and a grade 11, all boys. It's great. And we were talking about awe, and I think awe has something to do with kind of this ritual and this engagement because
Mm-hmm.
um we were looking at a confession about how we experience awe when we're standing in front of mountains and sparkling lakes and hummingbirds and things like that, but we forget about awe in the moments of the squirrel in the backyard and washing dishes and going out for the evening stroll that you know you have to do because like you have to get out and move at least one time a day and like all of those kinds of things. um and it was this idea of like in a I guess Christian theological context,
Yeah.
of experiencing God's creation and being reminded of like just like the enormity and the beauty and the interconnection that we feel with creation in like those little things, and how that like awe should be part of our everyday life.
Mhm.
And I think that like if you want to have a life where you can live life with awe at what's happening around you, I think that ritual plays a really important part of that, because it gives you the space to be intentional about it. Because otherwise we're going to forget to live in awe. And that's
Yes.
because it's so easy.
So
to
easy
not.
to lose the attention to
Mhm.
to awe. And it's so interesting. I saw that you were doing that today, and I love that. And when I bring my patients into the Tranquil Minds program, that's actually part of my intake, is asking how and where do you experience awe and wonder?
Amazing.
Because not everyone has a religious spiritual practice, but
Mhm.
I have yet to meet a person saying that they have never had an experience of awe or wonder. And when we're in that space, when we're soaking in, whether that is in nature, whether we are noticing that in architecture or in watching our children, like whatever it is that's bringing us that moment of awe, it's incongruent with anxiety. Like you are not
Yeah.
stressed out and in awe at that same moment.
Yeah.
There's no space for it. And that is, to me, my motivation for encouraging awe and talking about awe. And I love this idea that creating ritual brings depth to that
Yes.
experience by actually creating the moments to notice that. Because I don't think there's any more magic happening. I posted today, like, who's ready for more magic? And I am. And I don't think that there's more out there. I think there's always the same amount. It's just like, are you watching for it? And
Yes.
I want to spend as much time as I can watching and appreciating and like soaking this in.
Yeah, and I think that we have this like mistaken idea that something like awe and something like magic um has to be spontaneous and that you can't ritualize it. But just like I think with creativity, if you put some constraints on it, it's actually so much easier because you're setting yourself up to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like prime yourself for it and put yourself in that place, right?
You have to show up.
Yeah. And you have to be ready for it. And ritual, I think, is the thing that not only helps us to be practiced enough to see the spontaneous awe, but also just like gives us like forces us into that space. So that we're seeing it more regularly.
Yeah.
And that's I think it's funny, I didn't necessarily think of the ritual and the awe piece as interconnected until I was talking to you today. And then I was like, oh yeah,
This is just
that
this
those
is where
are
we were
that's a
meant
connection.
to land, Colleen. That was like
Yeah.
a mic drop moment of just like this is how we get more awe. We intentionally cultivate it through our ritual and our understanding.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I feel like leaving it right there.
I think, yeah. I don't think I could come up with anything more wise tonight.
You have already shared your wisdom with us. Colleen, thank you so much for joining tonight. I can see some comments coming in. Ashal is saying this has been a beautiful conversation this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Ash. It's actually Ashley.
Ashley, okay.
Was a staff member at Minnesota this summer.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So, hi, Ashley.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Thanks for everyone that is joining tonight. And thank you, Colleen, for coming on to celebrate the opening of the Momentum Club.
I'm so excited to hear what's happening next.
Yeah. So tomorrow we have Dr. Emily Bennett. She does a lot of work in habits, and her training, Habits Are Magic, is happening soon. And so we're going to be talking all about her perspective on habits and the magic within a habit.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that too.
That's exciting.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful evening, Colleen, and everybody watching us. And I'll be back tomorrow, not with Colleen, but with Emily. All right.
And I will maybe show up and say hi anyway.
Yes.
In the comments.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.